Diversity, equity, and inclusion, once seen as needed steps towards building a fairer and more representative society, are now at the center of one of the most controversial cultural debates of our time. From boardrooms to classrooms, DEI initiatives have reshaped hiring, education, and corporate policy across the country. Supporters call it progress, an overdue correction to centuries of systemic injustice. But critics argue that beneath the surface, these programs can create new forms of division, foster resentment, and reward identity over merit. They question whether DEI truly levels the playing field or whether it simply shifts inequality from one group to another. In a society striving for unity, are we unintentionally widening the gap? In this documentary, Blake, Maddie, and Irene will examine the consequences of a movement that now touches every corner of American life. What began as a moral mission is now a movement that is attempting to redefine what equality means in ways we never expected. DEI aims to promote representation and fairness. However, these programs often prioritize identity over merit, leading to unintended consequences that need closer examination. A study by the Brandon Hall Group found that 35% of organizations do not measure the impact of DEI training at all, and only 20% consider themselves good or excellent at measuring DEI training effectiveness. This suggests a significant gap in assessing the actual outcomes of such programs. Additionally, critics argue that DEI initiatives can lead to reverse discrimination, or the discrimination against large racial majority groups. For instance, some groups have faced accusations of discriminating against white candidates through diversity-focused hiring practices. A predominant example of reverse discrimination due to DEI is in 2021, when Coca-Cola faced backlash over an employee training course that encouraged staff to be less white, associating whiteness with negative traits. The company clarified that the course was not part of its official training curriculum, but acknowledged the controversy it sparked regarding DEI training content. DEI started with good intentions. Back in the 1960s, laws were passed to stop discrimination at work and in schools. Presidents like Kennedy and Johnson created programs to help people get fair treatment, no matter their race or background. Later, new laws like Title IX and the Americans with Disabilities Act made sure women and people with disabilities were also protected. In the 1980s and 90s, big companies started using the idea of diversity as a business strategy. They hired people just to focus on making workplaces more inclusive. DEI became part of how companies and schools worked. In 2003, the Supreme Court said it was okay for colleges to consider race when deciding who gets in, and under President Obama, the government added even more DEI programs. By the 2010s, DEI was everywhere. Mandatory training, hiring rules, and new job requirements. After George Floyd's death in 2020, many companies and schools doubled down on DEI to show they were supporting change. But soon, people started questioning it. Some said DEI was becoming unfair, giving too much attention to race and not enough to individual effort or ability. In 2023, the Supreme Court said colleges can't use race in admissions anymore, as decided in Students for Fair Admissions INC versus Harvard and UNC. In 2024, the new administration cut DEI programs from federal agencies. Big companies like Walmart and Meta also pulled back their DEI teams. What started as a push for fairness is now a major debate. Some still support it, others say it's gone too far. In some instances, DEI initiatives have resulted in unintended consequences. In the United Kingdom, several councils and universities implemented hiring practices aimed at increasing diversity. For example, Westminster City Council adopted a version of the US-based Rooney Rule, requiring minority candidates to be included on shortlists for senior roles. While intended to promote inclusivity, such practices have faced criticism for potentially sidelining qualified candidates based on race or gender. Critics, including Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, have labeled these measures as discriminatory, advocating instead for merit-based hiring. This case and many more highlight the growing legal and societal debates surrounding DEI initiatives. To delve deeper into this issue, we got personal interviews from 3 teachers, Mr. Kielmeyer, Mr. Shanny, and Ms. Youngland.
So we're here with Mr. Kielmeyer as a part of our DEI interviews. So our first question for you is what does DEI mean to you personally?
So to me personally, it's funny, we just talked about this in our staff meeting today, because with the government obviously right now, right, with executive orders that President Trump's kind of eliminated those programs, or trying to eliminate some of those programs. I think the intention of it is to make sure that everybody is fairly represented in the job market, and there's some concern by people that depending on your ethnicity or maybe even your gender or whatnot, that maybe you're not going to be equally considered for different positions or different types of jobs, those types of things. So that's kind of how I see it as a whole.
Yeah. Do you believe that there's an inherent discrimination or bias when an institution picks one race over another for DEI programs, like when programs pick individuals of African American descent over people of Jewish descent?
I would think, for me personally, again, I've coached for a very long time, and I always would say that the most important thing is that everybody has an equal opportunity. And to me, that should be regardless of gender you are, what race, what ethnicity, what religion, how tall you are, how short you are, any of those types of things, when it doesn't apply. But so I would think that basing jobs on those characteristics to me would be, that might be somewhat troublesome, picking one group over another just based on that sort of thing.
Based on the visual?
Yeah.
Do you believe DEI programs should be implemented?
I think that, again, I think we should hire the people who are most qualified. I don't think there should be quotas on this group or that group, or based on anything except for can they do the job that they are applying to do.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gilmore.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we're here with Mr. Shaney, and our first question is, what does DEI mean to you personally?
Well, DEI is a political initiative that's built on the idea of providing opportunities for people of different ethnicities and minority groups a chance at serving a particular role or need within a government organization or otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it. Do you believe that DEI programs best understand the virtue of colorblindness?
I think in principle, right, they definitely exist for a tangible purpose or reason, but in execution and effectiveness, remains to be seen. There's going to be certain programs that I don't think are meeting that bill whatsoever, and there's going to be some initiatives that are probably doing a better job than others.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Do you believe DEI programs should be implemented?
No. In what I would say too is qualifications for diversity, equity, and inclusion are pretty much already on the bill. And if there were certain cases or circumstances where individuals were not allowed the same privileges or liberties that anyone would be able to receive or afford, that individual organization would absolutely be held responsible and liable for that decision.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. So we're here with Ms. Youngland discussing DEI. Our first question for you, what does DEI mean to you personally?
I think diversity, equity, and inclusion has a lot to do with the society in which we live in as Americans. One of the biggest things that I think is different about our nation versus others is all of us either chose to come here or were forced to come here at some point as an immigrant country. And that means that we have a lot of diversity.
Yeah.
We also have this kind of concept in our Declaration of Independence about equity, that all men are created equal. And I also think inclusion is probably something that we struggle with even more than equity, in the sense that it's one of those things that has changed and progressed on what inclusion really means for all in American society, whether that means about having the right to vote or ending segregation laws or immigration status, things like that. I think are a big part of who we are as a nation.
Oh, definitely, yeah. How do you measure the success of a DEI initiative?
I think a lot of it has to go with really looking at those who have been historically disadvantaged in our country. Mostly the easiest way to basically attest those who have been historically disadvantaged would have to do with laws that were passed specifically against certain groups, and to show that they have been historically disadvantaged and as a result have suffered for many generations because of laws that were passed.
Yeah.
So for example, I think one of the biggest things that we tried to do after the Second World War with the GI Bill, that every veteran, no matter where they came from, what part of the country, what their ethnic background is, their age, all of that, every veteran gets a GI Bill, meaning that when they came back, to help them kind of ease back into mainstream society after the Second World War, they could use their GI Bill to really help themselves by getting lower interest rates for home ownership and use the money to go to college, for example, and move into more middle-class working jobs. It sounds really good on paper,
It does,
right?
yeah.
It's like Congress passes this, and it's like this is the Civil Servicemen Readjustment Act. But when it comes home, my grandfather can use the GI Bill no problem because he's a white guy from Missouri, and he can enroll at Mizzou, and he can enroll at the University of Missouri in Columbia and go to college, and he can buy a house, and then he can go and use part of his GI Bill to become a dentist.
Yeah.
If my grandfather was not a white guy from Missouri and he was a black guy from Mississippi, even though I get my GI Bill, when I come home, because of segregation laws, I can't enroll in the University of Mississippi because even though it's a state institution, a public institution, I can't go there because my skin is black, even though I'm from Mississippi and I'm qualified to go. I'm gonna get rejected because they only allow white students to attend the University of Mississippi. I can't buy a house with my GI Bill because banks are not gonna loan black guys money, things like that.
All right, that's good. And then our third question, do you believe there's inherent discrimination or bias when an institution picks one race over another, for example, like Jewish people or African Americans, etc.?
So I think that goes back to the last one. If you can really show that groups have been historically disadvantaged, then that is easy to show that so if whites can move into the middle class really easy using the GI Bill, but black veterans cannot move into the middle class because they're not allowed, then they have been there should be reasons why we might look at something like affirmative action where we choose one group over another, even if they're both qualified, but because one group hasn't had as many opportunities because laws have inhibited them, then yeah, they should be able to move forward a little bit.
Yeah. And then our last question for you, do you believe that DEI programs should be implemented?
I don't know what really DEI programs implemented really means, in the sense that, like, have there been wrongs that need to be fixed? Yes. How those wrongs should be fixed is really the debatable. It's not just reparations and money, but should it be through opportunities that people don't have? I think that is a little bit of a trickier line to really show how that can work. Do I think we need to recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion, that it's a big part of our lives? I do.
Yeah.
I do think that. And should we even look at that and recognize that in certain areas, like in the military, for example, and really look at not ignore what the Tuskegee Airmen did, but acknowledge what they did? And maybe even their grandchildren acknowledge that this is what they've done and contributed to America, just like my white grandpa from Missouri, kind of thing.
That's all the questions we have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Each person we spoke to brought a different lens to the conversation, some questioning DEI's fairness today, others reminding us of the unfairness that shaped the past. While Mr. Kielmeyer and Mr. Shaney emphasized the need for equal treatment without racial bias, Ms. Youngland reminded us that equality on paper hasn't always meant equality in practice. Together, their voices show just how complex and deeply personal the debate around DEI is. The supporters of DEI say that these initiatives promote diversity, equality, and inclusion. However, in their mission to encourage these ideals, they have done exactly the opposite. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, a Republican, reminded residents in his executive order that the state constitution prohibits preferential treatment or discrimination based on race, ethnicity, or sex, which are the very ideals DEI programs advocate for. This raises questions about compliance with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits race discrimination in employment. The FIRST program's website highlights regulations requiring that federal agencies ensure grant recipients comply with non-discrimination law. The most basic implication is that universities can't refuse to hire someone or prefer one candidate over another because of race or sex, but emails show that this has been happening. Overall, DEI programs shut down diversity, equity, and inclusion much more than they promote these ideals.